So Rex Tillerson is, of course, Secretary of State, former CEO for ExxonMobil. And of course, as the Secretary of State, he has to back up his boss. And they famously had this meeting with the Russians a couple of days ago, and there was only a couple of people in the room. And on our side, it was just Trump, Rex Tillerson, and an interpreter. And on their side, it was just Putin, their foreign minister, Lavrov, and an interpreter. So now what message Tillerson wants to put out is, look, we were tough on Russia. Now, were they actually tough on Russia? Not at all. How are they tough on Russia? Well, we brought up the idea of collusion a couple of times, and including right in the beginning. And what happened after you brought it up? Putin said he really didn't do it, so we have to, quote, move forward. Now that's a Rex Tillerson quote. In fact, I'm going to give you the full quote, which is the relevant part of this story in a second. So in other words, you weren't tough on the Russians at all. So there's no threat of any consequences for their meddling in our election. There was just no repercussions whatsoever. You just brought it up, they said we didn't do it, and you said, oh, okay, fine, let's move forward. Well, no, Tillerson says, no, the issue of the sanctions were brought up. In fact, this is now from the Washington Post, the day after. Trump told Putin that members of Congress were pushing for additional sanctions against Russia over the election issue, Tillerson said. So that's Tillerson saying that, and here's a direct quote from Tillerson. But the two presidents, I think, rightly focused on how do we move forward, he added. Okay, so there's the, we brought up the issue and then we decided we're not gonna do anything about it and we move forward. That was clear enough anyway. But there, he at least said, hey, we discussed the sanctions, okay? So get off our back. So what does Trump do the very next day after Tillerson tells that to the press? Rex, meet the underside of a bus. He tweets out, sanctions were not discussed at my meeting with President Putin. Nothing will be done until the Ukrainian and Syrian problems are solved. So get a load of that tweet. Number one, Rex, what are you doing? Everybody knows that if you go to back up the president and you lie for him, he will throw you under a bus unwittingly because he doesn't know anybody, he's an idiot. He's an unguided missile. He should say that you discuss sanctions because that would seem more tough on Russia. But he can't help himself. He comes out and goes, sanctions? Why would we talk about sanctions? I didn't mention that at all. Oh, Rex, did I already tell you to lie and say that we mentioned sanctions? Well, somebody's got to tell the president in more than tweet length that happened so he doesn't undermine his own officials. Okay, so there again, the president tells somebody to go do something and then contradicts it right afterwards. But if you notice, the second part's also important. He said in the second part of that tweet, nothing will be done about the sanctions until the Ukrainian and Syrian problems are solved. You know what that means? There ain't gonna be no sanctions. Gee, Trump is thinking about it this way. The Russians helped me win that election. Should I put sanctions on them for that? He's like, of course not. I'm not gonna put sanctions on them. They're the ones who helped me get elected president. So I love this infinite timeline of whenever Syria gets resolved, then we'll move on to sanctions. Yeah, when there's peace in the Middle East, Trump will do something about the Russians. They're never, ever going to do anything about it because they love the Russian meddling in the elections, and whatever small lies that Rex Tillerson was putting out there are quashed by Trump himself. As usual, very poorly played. TYT membership gets you commercial-free Young Turks. Download it, stream it, podcast it, get all the network shows, and support independent media. TYTnetwork.com/join.